Hey guys, welcome to the channel. As you see in the thumbnail, what if Issei is the son of the Dragon King Acnologia Part 1. Before I start, please do support for more awesome content and subscribe my channel and like this video. Go support and follow the DragonKingNatsu for writing that awesome fanfic, and also make sure to comment on this story, link in the description. Let's start this video. Supernaturally aware humans had it rough in Kuoh, or anywhere for that matter. Even the cleverest and strongest of humans without a sacred gear or other weapon were barely a match for a low-class stray devil. They get a sinking feeling that no matter how much discipline and focus they put towards their training, they still won't be able to live in peace. And since they're aware of the supernatural, they usually won't be ignored. Yeah, just knowing that there was a whole other world hidden beneath your own was a risk. Such was the case of the Haidu family. They were a simple, middle-class, three-person household with a son, Issei, a mother, Hinoka, and a father, Takeshi. Issei was a quick-witted kid with thick, constantly messed up brown hair and curious brown eyes to match, and he had a penchant for sticking his nose where it didn't belong. Most kids did. His father had short, messy black hair and wore thick glasses, giving him a businessman-like appearance. Though he had a small frame, he wasn't weak by any means. And finally, Hinoka, a woman of average height, had smooth brown hair down to her neck. Her bangs in the front were cut short, giving her a minorly tomboyish face. While Takeshi worked in an office, she mostly stayed at home to guard the house and watch Issei. The only thing that was unusual was that both of the parents knew magic. It was almost entirely a result of learning of the supernatural and searching for a way to combat it. See, before Issei was born, the married couple stumbled upon something they really weren't supposed to see, and they were never the same ever since. Both discovered that they possessed some aptitude for magic and were therefore a special type of human called a magician. Technically, they were stray magicians because they didn't want to affiliate themselves with any group, but they weren't powerful. Joining an official magician group would only drag them further into the world that they wanted to escape from. Sure, they had some rudimentary knowledge of the art, more than almost everyone else, though it wasn't like they could hold a candle to the immense power of legends like Merlin. So, yeah, in order to get the power they needed, they did something really stupid. Incredibly stupid. The reason they did something so drastic stemmed from the frightening events of the week prior. Issei was only 5 years old at the time, and already a stray devil had wandered through their areas and killed some of their neighbors. Obviously, they tried to stop it, yet the best they could do was hold it off until a devil arrived to kill it. They were powerless to defeat the monster, a problem they prayed they wouldn't have in the future. Now, here they were, poring over a musty arcane tome that they pilfered from the church. Kind of a ballsy move, considering the church was run by fallen angels, who, unlike their counterparts in heaven, have no qualms with killing humans for a simple unused book. Still, the information on teleportation spells was so dearly worth it. They'd be able to avoid anything that came after them to keep Issei safe. Takeshi. Issei's mother yelled. They're coming already. Did you figure anything out yet? While her husband tried to decipher the text and learn the one spell they'd need for the rest of their life, she was sensing threats. Issei peacefully slept in his room. Hold on, I've almost got it, he replied. Wake Issei, we've gotta go, now. Honey, you better know what the hell you're doing. She didn't doubt him for a second though, since he was much better at space-time magic than her. He didn't bother to reply, flipping the page in the book and gazing intently at a diagram. Maybe there is a way to escape this after all, he thought quietly. He hummed to himself and adjusted his glasses as he studied the time, transfixed by the promise one of the spells offered. No wonder the fallen really want this back. This could provide nearly endless opportunities. Mom, what's going on? Issei slurred tiredly as the two descended the steps from his bedroom. It was past midnight, and the poor kid could barely stand. There are some bad people after us, but mommy and daddy will take care of it. Right, honey. By the time she finished, they were standing right next to Takeshi, who was sitting cross-legged on the floor. Yeah, he answered, still focused. Change in plans, we're going to use this. He held the tome up with a hand and showed it to his wife. Her eyes widened. You can't use this. What if we end up somewhere hostile? What if we don't have enough magic power and it kills us? She said the last part quietly, as if she had accepted that this was a better idea, but still feared the inevitable risks. Think of it. We could give Issei a safe life, free of everything in this world. Maybe he could make something of himself. I have no plans of involving you in this spell, I'll do it myself. Teleporting around will only delay the inevitable. But this, he looked up, this is a chance at a new beginning. Issei was confused, but he had never seen his father so determined before in his life. He knew his father was much quieter and more selective with words than his mother, though the man rarely even outright denied her. Then again, Issei wasn't able to understand anything going on at the time, only that his father was incredibly serious for whatever reason. Without any further words, Takeshi took a piece of chalk, stood up, and began drawing a symbol on the floor. As the white substance rubbed off onto the wood, it emitted both a painful screech and a violent glow. By the time he was finished inscribing the symbol, it was a meter-wide pentagram humming with energy. "Hinoka, Issei. Get in the circle." There was a knock at the door. "Shit," he cursed. Hinoka nodded to him, many words being conveyed in a glance. "I'll hold them off. You just worry about Issei. I need to know he's safe." With that, she nudged the young boy into the circle. "I need you to stay here, okay? You can do that for me, right, Issei-kun?" The boy nodded, bewildered. "I'm counting on you, honey." She faced the door and held out both hands, an odd blue light pouring from them and reinforcing a barrier around the house. This time the knock was a slam, and the door nearly bounced off its hinges with a loud thud. "Even at the cost of my life, I will see you safe." "I hope this works," Takeshi mumbled to himself. He tossed the book into the circle with his son and began to chant in Latin. Issei gasped as the chalk outline began to glow. As that was happening, however, the light was fading from his father's eyes and he was beginning to slump forward, unable to muster the energy to keep himself upright. Takeshi's hair grew gray and his face lost its youthful definition, as if he aged 20 years in an instant. "I love you, Issei," Hinoka said, as her son's body began to glow the same white as the symbol. "Me too," her husband added, the chant over, the energy fading. "Mom? Dad? Wait. Don't go. Please." Issei cried, now able to see through his hand. His father fell on his face just as the door burst open and a man with black wings entered the room. "You'll never find him or that book," Hinoka growled. The man was enraged by the proceedings, a wide-brimmed hat shadowing his features. "What did you do?" Issei's screams of protest were fading out, as if someone had turned the volume down. And along with the sound his body and the book seemed ghostly translucent. Then, blinding light emerged from the pentagram, and a sound equivalent of a thunderclap echoed through the room. When it all calmed down, Issei and the spell tome were both gone. Dimensional travel. Takeshi mumbled feebly, a victorious final smirk on his average features. He looked up towards the man, his body hardly able to support the gesture, and gloated, "You lose, fallen angel." With that, Issei found himself in a whole new world entirely. Fiori X 773. Zonia Mountain was one of the most remote and peaceful locations in all of Fiori. Standing hundreds of miles away from the nearest town, nestled in the northwestern part of the country, the tall mountain was the epicenter of an eternal cold. Whether caused by magic or a simple climate anomaly, no one ever bothered to find out, but some did believe in a supernatural connection. Mysterious wispy clouds consistently obscured the peak, inspiring rumors and superstitions among the locals. Local, as in only 20 miles away where there was a small settlement. Very few people claimed to have traveled to the peak and, as such, it was the perfect place for someone who didn't want to be found. That is, if they could endure the year-long cold spell and occasional snow showers. It wasn't that huge compared to some of the mountains east of Fiori, so it wasn't attractive to thrill-seeking mountain climbers. Besides, no one wanted to brave the awful weather. That was why Acnologia chose it as his refuge. Peace and quiet, free from some of his least favorite creatures in the world. Humans. He hated weakness, it was something that he never understood. As an enormous black dragon that could claim to be one of the 3 most powerful beings in Fiori, if not Earthland, he couldn't comprehend that no one else could attain the same strength as he did. Here, though, he wasn't bothered by anything and could exist in solitude with the only being he cared for, himself. In all honesty, he was human too, once upon a time. 400 years ago, there was a war between dragons and the humans they subjugated. One dragon had spoken out against their mistreatment of humans and as such sparked a rebellion throughout the entire world, but it had little chance of winning. Until a young black dragon decided to take in a white-haired orphan and train him in dragon magic, making him the first dragon slayer. But that was long ago in another time and another life. Acnologia had long since overcome his weakness. It was there, curled at the top of the mountain, that the dragon noticed a foreign energy signature. He cracked open a beady pearly white eye and raised his rounded snout. Something was close, seeking his energy, even drawing on it for some type of magic he could hardly fathom. Unwittingly letting out an annoyed growl, he pressed his paws against the frozen rock and hauled his massive form onto all fours. The dragon, now awake and standing in all of his glory, was a sight to behold. His 40-meter-long body was covered with midnight black, round scales extending from his head to the tip of his tail, each linking together into an impenetrable armor. 2 great feathered black wings, like those of a massive bird, extended nearly 25 meters on each side, clearly capable of supporting his weight. His underbelly was a dull gray, contrasting with vibrant exotic blue patterns, overlaying the black scales and wings. His head was rounded, his snout blunt, and 4 backwards-facing scaled plates gave it a fierce visage. One look at the dragon would inspire dread in the most dauntless of hearts, not to mention seeing a mouth full of sharp teeth. But for just a moment, this enormous dragon had doubts, that unfamiliar magic tugging at his own life force and drawing power for God knows what. He huffed, almost laughing at how weak the spell was, considering that the large amount of energy stolen was but a drop in his reservoir. Then, as suddenly as it came, it stopped. With a groan, he rested his body black on the ground and closed his eyes. Nothing could harm him, anyways, he knew. Still, he was absolutely not prepared for what came next. "Mom. Dad." A shrill, high-pitched voice wailed from behind him. He whipped his head around and came face to face with a young, brown-haired child, maybe 5 years old. For a moment, he wasn't sure the kid noticed him, then the boy's eyes widened. He was sure the human was about to scream, terrified of the giant beast. "What did you do to them?" "Huh?" Did he hear the kid right? Instead of fleeing and yelling, the miniature human accused him straight to his face. In all honesty, Acnologia was nearly at a loss for words. "I did nothing to your parents." Something was unexplainable about this boy, as if he had immense power hidden within his feeble form. It was an odd feeling, one that the former slayer dismissed quickly. He had been alive for too long to have something surprise him. Wait, speaking of surprise, how did this kid get here, and what did it have to do with that strange magic? It was a confusing situation. There was definitely no way that anyone with the puny magic he had in his system could brave the climb to get to the top. He decided that it was best to voice his question, as horrid as the thought of engaging in conversation with a child was. "What brought you here, weakling?" "My name's Issei." He shot back immediately. Acnologia growled threateningly. "Answer before I lose my patience." Issei's eyes went wide, but he refused to back down. "Mom woke me up and said there were bad people after us, so I went downstairs and Dad was doing weird things with a book and some white stuff making symbols on the floor. Then someone came in the house and Dad said something funny, then he fell over and I was here and it's cold." The boy paused for breath, the dragon barely understanding the rushed sentence. "What did you do to him?" "Idiot," Acnologia huffed, irritated. "You say your father used a book as a reference to draw a symbol." The boy defiantly refused to answer. It didn't matter if he did, seeing as how the kid was probably too young to understand the situation. If Acnologia's suspicion was correct, then it was likely the father either tried to summon the black dragon himself or draw on his magic to take care of an intruder, as crazy as it sounded. Either that or the human created a teleportation circle, one that he obviously didn't have the magical ability to activate successfully. It was then that the dragon spotted an open book resting on the ground near the kid. Acnologia brought his snout uncomfortably close to the brunette, almost bumping him as he read the text on the open page. "Much of it is in a cryptic language unknown to even me," he mused. It was certainly an anomaly considering that he knew most ancient languages after living upwards of 400 years. There are words he recognized, however. Specifically, 2-dimensional travel. That was a shock. Issei's father had the capability to travel dimensions. Unheard of. Well, it did apparently cost the man his life, so it was not without a price, but such a magic was nearly impossible. It was not even considered as a viable side project of the best minds and strongest mages. "What did you do?" Issei repeated, this time as a dangerously quiet mutter, tears forming in his eyes as he glared at Acnologia's wide eye. "Nothing. Your pathetic father used magic to send you to a different dimension." He huffed, continuing, "He was weak enough that it cost him his own life, and thus required a measly amount of my magic to complete the spell." "Dad isn't dead." The boy cried out, the tears now rolling down his face. "You liar." Whether or not the kid had a hidden power, he was Balsi, the black dragon had to at least give him that. Acnologia sighed. This was just one of the many reasons that he couldn't stand humans. "I have no reason to lie." The boy fell back, landing on the rocky mountaintop, but he could care less about the pain. In fact, it was kind of welcome. He couldn't continue to deny it anymore. The dragon, intimidating as it was, told no lies and affirmed his fears. His father once enlightened him on what death was, it meant that he'd never see the person again. Ever. But he wanted to see his dad, he wanted to go back home. Why did his father have to leave him? He gazed at the ground, more sinister thoughts flashing through his mind. Acnologia was just about to turn around and go back to sleep to ignore this kid when the boy mumbled something. "You say Dad died because he was weak?" The dragon grunted. "At least this human understood something about life. Just like you, brat. I don't want to die." He yelled, not in fear, but in determination. "I'll show you, you ugly dragon." Whatever it was, something clicked right then for the immense dragon. An orphan child, left alone to fend for himself. A young boy, weak and frail but with an insatiable hunger for power. Someone who found a dragon, as if by luck or fate. Though he would never acknowledge the connections, his subconscious easily connected the dots. The only thing that was different was that Issei was from another dimension entirely, a concept that Acnologia had trouble coming to terms with. If he were to raise anyone as his dragon slayer, it had to be someone special, unique, and a human foreign to this world certainly fit the criteria. The possibility of someone almost as destructive as himself. That made the dragon almost giddy with sick, sinister anticipation. I am the Dragon King, Acnologia. You desire power, power that humans should never be able to attain. I can give you that. The boy looked hopeful. Yes, Acnologia grinned internally at the potential, you will be my dragon slayer and my son. It didn't take more than a day for Issei to begin doubting his decision. His new father did almost nothing beyond bringing him food to eat, which wasn't much more than a few berries. Instead, Acnologia insisted that Issei learn to sustain himself solely on the dragon's magic energy. Sure, that would ascertain that the boy wouldn't die of starvation, but it did absolutely nothing to sate his hunger or thirst. Then there was the cold. It was the second night when a huge snowstorm blew in, trapping the mountain's peak in a dense cloud and near blizzard-level conditions. Through it all, however, Acnologia was sleeping peacefully, undisturbed, as if he had no idea that his new chair was well on his way to dying of hypothermia. The poor kid only had a shirt and pants on, not even shoes. The wind had an inherent chill which penetrated to the bones, making his extremities verge on going numb. It's so cold, Issei thought, his teeth chattering. All of the mountain was practically frozen, save a ring around Acnologia where the dragon's body heat melted all of it. Slowly, the kid made the connection. If he slept close to the dragon, then he'd be fine. Then again, the dragon didn't like it when he got too close. Whatever, it didn't matter since survival was more important than his grumpy father's mood. Decision made, he slowly hobbled over, his body shivering, and curled up against the black dragon's warm body. Issei had never felt so comfortable, despite the fact that he was laying on rocks. He could just fall asleep right then and there with no worries. What are you doing, brat? The voice snapped him out of his trance, though he didn't pick up on the annoyed tone. In response, he giggled a little, probably somewhat delirious, and tried hugging the dragon's stomach. You're so warm, he mumbled, content. I told you to sleep over there. He pointed a claw towards the other side of the mountaintop. Your actions are unbecoming for any child of mine. Not like Issei had any idea what that meant. It was really, really cold, and you're really, really warm, Issei rationalized flawlessly. It brought a groan from Acnologia. While he may have been considered human 400 years ago, he had no idea how to raise a kid, nor could he recall much information about humans in general, besides the fact that he was stronger than all of them. Most importantly, he had no idea how to refute Issei's childish logic. Surely, a human with as much potential as Issei could endure mere below freezing temperatures. How else would he be capable of facing an ice dragon one day? One look at his son made his heart soften a little. Issei was still shivering, but he had his eyes closed and a carefree expression, as if Acnologia would protect him. Of course the dragon would, Issei was his son after all. Perhaps his expectations were too high for a child so young. Fine, if you are to be my son, then I will protect you. Tomorrow, we will visit the closest human settlement to get you the appropriate clothing. Soon, however, you must learn to care for yourself. He supposed that he couldn't expect too much of the boy yet. For now, instead of learning how to properly train his son, it seemed he first had to figure out how to be a father. The next day, Issei awoke with a happy yawn, stretching his arms out a little. For the whole night, he didn't have a single nightmare about the attack on his parents. Equally exciting was the beautiful sunrise from his vantage point at the top of the mountain. So cool. He gasped in awe at the bright rays of orange and yellow gleaming from the horizon. That meant it had stopped snowing, didn't it? It was certainly warmer, if not by much. Finally, you're awake, his father huffed. The whole night, the dragon didn't sleep, afraid he might unknowingly crush his son. At least he had the benefit of not needing much sleep. Oh, hey dad. Weird, the kid had never called him dad before. It was better than the butchered attempts at Acnologia, but the dragon was adverse to being addressed in such an affectionate and casual way. They didn't call him the ruthless Dragon King for nothing. I am glad you slept so well, Acnologia replied, a hint of sarcasm accidentally leaking in. Hopefully, in a few years, the boy would have built up a resistance to the temperatures and would be competent at hunting for his own food. I did, Issei agreed, not really paying much attention to his father's words and instead looking off into the distance. Please, 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 can you make this last forever? The sunrise? The dragon questioned. When Issei nodded, he resisted his urge to berate the kid, instead settling on a simple, no. Oh, Issei sighed, downcast. But it looks super awesome. Great, his son used the phrase super awesome. If he wasn't careful, he would completely lose all self-respect and his infamous reputation would be thrown down the drain. We are going to the base of the mountain today. Take your book. He would not leave such an unusual and valuable item lying around. Carefully, after Issei grabbed the artifact, the dragon stood, scooping Issei up in his claws. It was just demeaning for a human to ride on a dragon's back, especially his, so he would have to carry his son the whole way there without dropping or crushing him. Fortunately, it was only a couple hundred miles to Lavender Town, a distance he could cover in less than an hour at Issei safe speeds. After a gale of wind from his wings blew all the snow off of his home, the two were off. For Issei, the flight was remarkable. Seeing the world from this angle was eye-opening, an experience that put an enormous grin on his face. For a few moments, he had completely forgotten about what happened not 2 nights ago and lived completely and utterly in the present. Below the two, the mountains rushed by, eventually opening up to a grassy countryside. Even though he was gripped tightly on all sides, there was an undeniable sensation of freedom that prompted a single question. If all dragons get to fly, I want to be a dragon too. Amazingly, Acnologia heard the boy perfectly with his enhanced senses, negating the rushing wind. Good. I would expect no less. While Issei might have had no idea what his father said, he knew that Acnologia would be proud. The flight ended far before Issei wanted it to. After protesting relentlessly and even going as far as whacking Acnologia's nose with his book, he eventually gave up. In return, the dragon promised that one day he would be able to give Issei the ability to fly, provided that the brunette acted appropriately. And so the two landed a couple miles outside of the small town, hopefully out of eyesight of people that would spread rumors. Why did we land here? Issei complained. I don't want to walk. Quit complaining. That was followed by a sharp look. The boy opened his mouth but was cut off. Now, brat. Issei crossed his arms and huffed, trying to imitate the dragon's typical response while facing away from his father. You will listen to me, Issei. His father commanded, only he didn't sound as deep and frightening as usual. It also wasn't in his typical booming voice. Issei turned around, only to find himself looking upwards at a white-haired man. Huh. Where's Dad? He squinted at the adult, as if trying to deduce something, but couldn't find out what. Compared to his human parents, this guy was taller, more muscular, and oddly clothed. His longer than shoulder length, wild, dark blue hair was something Issei had never seen before. The man's eyes, too, had a thin yet dark ring around them, while the rest of his face was quite tan. He also bore strange blue markings, something that reminded Issei of the dragon that adopted him, and they matched a high-collared back cloak covered with similar patterns. The man actually laughed, only it was more condescending than humorous. You thought I would walk into the town as a dragon? He drew. Well, the brat was only 5 years old. I don't get it, Issei pouted. Where is Dad? His name is Acnologia. Looks like the kid wouldn't be winning any medals for his prodigal genius. Acnologia, brat. Follow me, you're wasting our time. He began heading north towards their destination, leaving Issei still a little baffled, even if the kid did follow him. As they made their way to town, Issei figured it out. How are you, Dad? He's an awesome dragon, and you're a weirdo. Awesome dragon, Acnologia mimicked in his head, letting out a sigh. Why couldn't he have said fearsome? Well, he owed his son an explanation, even if it would go right over his head. I use Chaos Dragon Slayer magic. By having used this magic extensively to kill other pathetic dragons, I became the Dragon King. This form is far more practical yet not as powerful. I don't get it, the kid repeated. I know, Acnologia groaned inwardly. Acnologia seriously hoped that he would not regret this. Biori, April 16, X 775. So, brat, what do you want now? Acnologia was in human form for meditation purposes. He had claimed that it allowed him to be with the only company he cared for, his own, but that was after Issei was being particularly annoying. His eyes were closed, solely for the purpose of discouraging pointless conversation. Issei had no idea how the dragon knew he was there, which would be unnerving if the man wasn't his father. It's my birthday. Really? Acnologia huffed sarcastically. It was only the 5th time he had heard that all day. So, did you get me something? Issei prodded, leaning in close. No. Acnologia had no idea why people bothered celebrating birthdays. It wasn't as if someone had turned a year older on that date, no, they were merely a day older. Besides, he had lived so long that the distinction between being 401 years old and 402 years old was inconsequential. He was never the type to acknowledge that he had a bias anyways. Issei pouted. Not even a cape like yours. Cloak, not cape, Acnologia corrected firmly. Capes were pointless attire to him. And no, I bought you nothing. Wait, that left only one possibility in Issei's 5-year-old mind. That means you'll finally teach me Dragon Slayer magic. He cheered. He leaned in closer for an answer. Almost sensing that, Acnologia opened his sharp blue eyes, fixing his son with a stare that almost made the boy jump. No. Chaos Dragon Slayer magic, the kind Acnologia used, was dangerous. While other dragons could teach their slayers magic at such young ages, Acnologia would rather not disintegrate his son, since there was no way his body could take it. With a groan, the brunette responded, "How else am I supposed to pay back the fallen angel?" "You promised me power," he accused, knowing the dragon had yet to deliver on that promise. It took a minute, then Issei heard a few chuckles, then it turned into an all-out cackle. It was a strange sound, completely foreign to the no-nonsense, sardonic tone that the dragon normally carried. You're worried about revenge." Acnologia laughed. "Brat, you're Issei Haidu, my son, revenge is beneath you. Soon, you will be a dragon, and no creature could face your wrath and live, so you need not worry about such inconsequential things as revenge. Your mere existence would be an agent of retribution." "Revenge? What's that?" Issei would have added what is retribution, but he had no idea how to pronounce it, and his father hated when he mispronounced things. It probably stemmed from the boy butchering Acnologia so often. Acnologia wasn't too happy. Did he seriously have to teach his son what revenge meant? Though he may have instructed that boy in grammar, proper speech, and the abilities of dragons, he was still not the best teacher. Revenge is a petty thought. It is when you wish harm on someone who harmed you. Since you are my child, such thoughts are unnecessary because you will one day become so powerful that no one can harm you. Acnologia recalled with disdain a similar mindset that he held in his youth. It was why he began killing dragons after all. "Like you?" The strange chuckle returned. "Yes." Issei thought for a moment, liking the sound of that. His old human father was killed by a fallen angel, supposedly, but he wouldn't need to worry about the past when he was tough and awesome like his dad. Yet, something still bugged him, making him reach down and pick up a familiar book, flipping open to the page he had bookmarked. "What if I want to go home?" Sure, he had a home here, and Acnologia treated him as a son, although it wasn't like he could forget about where he came from. Acnologia, for once, seemed to understand what the boy's thoughts were on the matter. "When you return, it will be for your own curiosity, not for revenge on others." With that, he gave his dad a huge hug. At first, the dragon was clueless, shocked even, but eventually he began to accept that his son wasn't as cold-hearted as him. Safely in his father's arms, Issei mumbled quietly, "You're the best dad ever." Fiori X 778. "Issei. Are you listening?" The dragon roared. "What?" "Yeah, of course," he rubbed the back of his head, completely flustered. His father didn't move an inch and merely sighed. "Okay, I wasn't, but I am now," he added, as if that justified everything. The dragon leaned in close and made a dangerously low growl, a gesture that used to scare Issei, but hardly had an impact anymore. "I was planning on giving you a gift, but I have no obligation to grant you power, even if you are my son," he warned. "Whoa, wait. Seriously, you're going to teach me Dragonslayer magic now?" Issei was pumped since Acnologia said he would only teach him his magic when he was old enough and had enough exposure to the unusual energy. Now, at 10 years old, it seemed he was prepared. Chaos dragon magic was volatile at best, and magic that unstable had an extreme toll on the body. Any other dragon magic also had profound effects, the most noticeable being that the user, called a Dragonslayer, slowly transformed into a dragon after many years of utilizing it. Chaos dragon magic accelerated this process and would easily kill the user if they were incapable of adapting to the potent energy, meaning that they couldn't be too old when they learned it. It was also lethal if the user was too young, overwhelming their body and killing them instantly. Issei especially was vulnerable to this when taken into account that he was not from Earthland. While Earthland mages had containers within their bodies that replenished themselves with the energy in the air called Ethernano, Issei had no such container. His body stored the energy all throughout, which would make it easier for Chaos Dragon magic to negatively affect him. Because he had been feeding Issei small amounts of his magic ever since his son was 5 years old, Acnologia strongly believed that if the boy accepted the magic, then it would work without incident. That Acnologia had deemed Issei ready was a huge excitement for the latter. Someday, Issei could be a dragon, just like his old man. That was his dream. Well, one of his dreams. "Are you ready?" Acnologia asked, though no part of it was a question. He would pump the kid full of magic no matter what the reply was. Issei nodded vigorously. "Yeah." The black dragon grinned, feeling a darker version of Issei's anticipation. After all, he couldn't leave a weak legacy. "This will hurt." With that, the dragon tapped a giant claw to Issei's. Strange blue energy gathered at the tip before flowing unbridled into Issei. The boy glowed blue for a second, then smirked. "I don't feel any." The next second, he was on the ground, writhing in pain as the energy coursed through his veins like fire. He was unable to think, to curse his father for not warning him of just how insane the pain was. His legs wouldn't work, he couldn't stand. He couldn't haul himself onto his knees. All he could do was cry out in agony. Then, there was a moment, a hiatus, where he took a deep breath and tried to clear his head. But it wasn't over, it was just the eye of the storm, only for it to hit him in full force once more. However, this time it wasn't his whole body, just his left hand. It was like someone had poured acid onto it, skinned it, then rubbed salt in the wound for good measure, only to decide that it wasn't bad enough. By leaps and bounds, it was the worst sensation of his life. While clutching his arm, he hardly noticed a strange gauntlet forming on it, a deep red with an emerald gem glowing a lucid green. Acnologia was reminiscent of the hand of a dragon. Then, the gauntlet changed, shifting into its second stage, growing larger and gaining yellow spikes, covering his entire forearm past the elbow. But that did nothing to ease the cruel torment. Crack. The suffering ended. Strange metal pieces, formerly covering his hand, littered the ground below him. The gauntlet had shattered. Issei was panting, sweat dripping off of his forehead and his body still convulsing slightly. While cradling his injured and sore arm, he shifted himself to a sitting position, glaring at his father. Acnologia never warned him that gaining power hurt this much. Then again, Issei thought, clenching his working hand into a fist, I feel great. Now, he was sturdier, fearless, and brimming with energy. Thanks, Dad. Though he was still smiling, the statement had a serious tone since it was a vital step for Issei. Acnologia, however, didn't bother to respond. He was too focused on those odd metallic remnants of what used to be a gauntlet. Sure, as the first Dragon Slayer he was familiar with problems and compatibility issues, but he had never seen anything like this. Whatever was laying on the ground was the unawakened source of Issei's hidden power, one of the first things the dragon had sensed all those years ago. It smelled almost familiar, almost like a dragon. Now, the energy stored within the artifact was flowing through the air, gleaming an ethereal red. Dad. Issei prompted. No, brat, I don't know, the dragon bit back. This thing is from your old world. Issei Ahmed. So what is it? It was more rhetorical, considering that his father already answered. Normally, this would prompt an agitated response from the dragon, but the two were so baffled that the comment went unnoticed. A disembodied voice rumbled with laughter. The dragon bared his teeth, and Issei gulped. Maybe I can help with that. The voice was deep, draconic like Acnologia's. The red mist gathered together, coalescing into a solid mass. As it began to take shape, the two instantly realized what it was. A dragon. It was tiny, only a couple feet taller than Issei, and was just as red as the mist it formed from. It resembled a western dragon with sharper features than Acnologia, red scales covering the entire body with a lighter on the underbelly. Its wings had a pale membrane as opposed to the black dragon's feathers, and its eyes were a deep green. I am Drag, the Welsh dragon, one of the two heavenly dragons. The dragon, clearly a he, stated in a voice nearly as deep as Acnologia's own. Thank you for freeing me from the sacred gear, though I must ask how. Acnologia huffed. Giving Issei my magic eradicated all traces of inferior magic from his body. You must be pathetic. Brag bristled at that. At full power, I could destroy you, whelp. He then sighed. This is a different world, right? I heard it when I was still sealed. Your magic follows foreign rules, that was probably how it broke the sacred gear. Those things were created by God, it was thought impossible to free a being from them. Your God must be a joke. Brag glared. No matter how you look, you're far too weak to break his rules, it must be this world's magic. There is no other explanation. The two were face to face, an odd sight with the size difference. Neither wanted to back down. The tension in the air was thick now, the powerful presence of the two dragons bearing down on Issei like an impending storm. You are in my territory, I suggest you respect me, Acnologia threatened. I am Acnologia, the Dragon King, the black dragon from the Book of Apocalypse, and I will not be talked down to by some runt. You dragon kings are all too prideful, Drake thought, irate. Though the larger dragon was right, he was far too weak at the moment to risk an all-out fight. He also wasn't keen on putting the boy, the one who was originally supposed to be his partner, in danger. After trying to follow the conversation while trying to understand the effects of the ritual on his body, Issei was lost. Wait. What's going on? The Welsh dragon answered. When you were born, a sacred gear was placed in you by God. Eventually, when you were transported here by means I don't remember, I came with you, sealed within that sacred gear. After Acnologia did whatever to make you a so-called Dragon Slayer, his magic purged the sacred gear from your body and broke it, releasing my spirit. Acnologia added on, speaking to Drake, the object that transported you to this world is the time lying by my son. He pointed a giant claw at the grey, snow-covered book laying by Issei. Okay, Issei replied, placing his hand on his chin while he addressed Drake. But why are you so small? You look weak. Wow, Drake thought, dejected, he does not pull punches. Until today, he liked to think he was deserving of his feelings of pride. Now, he was made fun of by his own partner, and would definitely get mocked by his rival, Albion, for his size. My body was destroyed when I was trapped in the gear. It seems to have reformed, somehow, though much smaller from my life force being weakened by God. I'll probably go back to normal size in a few years. Awesome. Issei cheered. When you're back to normal, I want to see dad kick your butt. He likes killing dragons, and he said he'd take me along as soon as I become a dragon slayer, cause he wants me to be a dragon too. He's your father, and you want to be a dragon. What was he talking about? Killing dragons to become one, that was almost as absurd as a dragon taking a human as his son. Acnologia grunted. Our magic is impossible for the human body to handle. It changes them into a dragon in time, and the process can be expedited by bathing in the blood of dragons, something my son is eager for. Drake tried not to shiver. If they chose to kill him now, they could. He was barely a match for a high-class devil at the moment, though he would never admit it. Acnologia gave a sick grin at his fellow dragon's discomfort. Do not fret, Drake. You can stick around. Issei needs a tutor to teach him about this earth he comes from. Besides, I am curious to see the power you claim to have. I am tired of crushing vermin and long for a challenge. Just what had the world's most unluckiest dragon gotten himself into this time? A power-hungry kid who wants to be a dragon, and a crazy, warmonger of a father who finds everything but himself and his son to be pathetic weak trash. Why did his former host have to be the one to end up in some other crackpot world, where the laws of nature were turned on their head? At least I am out of that blasted thing. If I ever find the means to return, kicking Albion's ass will be like taking a morning flight. The thought of Albion's jealousy of his freedom brought a genuine grin to his face. If that was the case, then he wasn't the world's unluckiest dragon after all. Maybe dealing with these two won't be a problem. It's not like I have anything better to do. His decision made, he leaned over until he was even with Issei's ear. If Acnologia calls himself your father, you can call me Uncle Drake. Got that, partner? Issei hugged the red dragon's neck. You've got it, uncle. From then on, Issei's life got even crazier. Fiori X 779. I, who is about to awaken, Issei began, taking an unsteady breath, am the heavenly dragon, who has stolen the principles of domination from God. Oh, man, he just hoped he remembered this right. I laugh at the infinite, and I grieve at the dream. Acnologia would never approve of this, but Issei didn't care. For the moment, the black dragon was occupied by more important matters. I shall become the red dragon of domination. And I shall sink you to the depths of the crimson purgatory. He finished the chant by striking a pose, fist pointed towards the sky. Then there was silence. The boy waited a few seconds, but nothing happened. Hey, partner, what are you up to? Issei yelped, twisting to face the voice behind him. The dragon slayer gave a nervous chuckle, rubbing the back of his head and shifting his gaze. Hi Uncle Drake. The Welsh dragon was much larger now, over twice the height of Issei with a far more intimidating presence. I thought you were asleep. He answered with a sigh. I was. Until I heard someone reciting the chant for Juggernaut Drive. You do realize that the sacred gear only works when it's on your arm, and I'm sealed in it, right? It wasn't the first time Issei had tried to use the sacred gear after hearing Drake talk about how much power it gave the wielder. At one point, he had fruitlessly tried to stick the pieces back together. Yeah, I know, Issei mumbled, put off. He plopped down on the rock, the cold ground hardly noticeable anymore. It's just that I don't want Dad to be disappointed. The Red Dragon Emperor recognized this pattern well. A few of his hosts had not lived up to expectations set upon them by family, but none of them had Acnologia as a father. That dragon took things to the extreme. Partner, when he didn't get the boy's attention, he tried again. Issei, you're young. You can't expect to defeat a dragon only a year after learning Dragon Slayer magic, no matter what your father says. Yeah, the boy countered, well then how else am I supposed to become a dragon? He was almost snarling at this point. Honestly, Drake had no idea why his partner wanted to be a dragon so badly. Humans could be strong too, no matter what Acnologia claimed, he had seen it plenty of times, and those humans were hailed as heroes. The Red Dragon, ironically, was learning from Acnologia how to take a human form after learning that the Chaos Dragon could appear human. If he ever were to return to Earth, it would help immensely with remaining inconspicuous and not prompting all three factions to attack. Anyways, Drake had a nephew to calm down. You already resemble your father. With his aid, it can't take more than another year. Sure enough, with each dragon Acnologia and Issei killed, the latter gained more draconic features. While the kid couldn't actually defeat a dragon, Acnologia knew some trick to speed up the process at least 10 times, meaning Issei looked less and less human by the day. It freaked Drake out, knowing the boy was gaining this power through murder, even if he didn't realize it. Do you think so? There were practically stars in his eyes now. Surely, Issei knew that he looked far from human. Sharp teeth and fangs glinted in his mouth when he smiled. His pupils were slits now, threatening to disappear to resemble something closer to Acnologia's freaky pupil-less orbs. Miniature black claws adorned his fingers and toes, and small, skin-colored scales were forming over a quarter of his body. There were blue markings near each eyebrow and decorating each upper arm, a less obvious version of the vibrant decorations on his father's scales. Acnologia had once likened his appearance to Dragon Force, whatever that was. It seemed, though, that there was no changing back to human until he was a full dragon. But what if I still can't kill a dragon, Issei worried. Then I'll help you, you're my partner after all. He had to change the topic before Issei got gloomy. It was tough to see such a cheerful kid beat down by such a ridiculous and arbitrary premise that his father forced on him. Want to go flying? That always got the kid's mind off of his problems. Awesome. Issei had jumped on his uncle's back in a heartbeat. Yeah, his new partner was a handful, but he'd deal with it. He always did. Fiori X 782. Issei was 14 now, and he had changed quite a bit. For one, his presence and posture had become intimidating, especially since he stood at 5'6", a good height for his age. If it weren't for Drake's lessons in concealing his presence, magic power would have radiated off of him uncontrollably with a frightening blue aura. Such was the aura of a dragon, especially when said dragon was the adopted son of the dragon of the apocalypse. That didn't mean Issei held a candle to his old man, or Drake for that matter, but he couldn't consider himself fully human anymore. While his hair was still brown and messy and his build lithe, there were two clearly noticeable differences. One, he had put some muscles on his thin frame, which was kind of irrelevant to his real strength, but it at least didn't make him look like a wimp. Two, he had gained tattoos similar to the ones his father had in both human and dragon form. The electric blue symbols and swirls were etched along his arms, a sign that the Dragon Slayer had reached a point far beyond what was intended by the magic. It was like the markings of Dragon Force, a stage where a slayer could temporarily access the power of a dragon when the body would appear more draconic. Issei and Acnologia, since they both were really dragons assuming a human form, no matter what Zeref claimed, had these markings permanently. Drake too had changed over this time. While it was not as drastic as Issei's, he had regained some of his old power, now standing at half the height of Acnologia. In a true insult to his pride, Issei was a head taller in dragon form, even if the teen was weaker. It was a touchy subject that was obviously brought up every time Issei had one of his lessons with the Welsh dragon. That wasn't the only thing different about the dragon. In addition to the slow return to his former glory, Acnologia had finally taught him how to appear human. Ever since he first learned how to properly perform the magic, he had spent far more time as a human than as a dragon. Currently, Drake was supervising his nephew at the closest town, lavishly called Lavender Town. Unlike the name might suggest, it was a down-to-earth place with very few wealthy and poor people. As it was in a remote location, it had very little contact with the rest of Fiori, something Drake appreciated even if the others didn't. Acnologia liked its proximity while Issei loved the shops, especially the bookstore. Ever since Drake taught the boy to read, both kanji and Earthland's written word, he always liked reading. Either way, all three agreed that they needed a break from the frigid mountain. Acnologia had wandered off long ago, leaving Issei and Drake to walk through the streets alone, attracting a lot of attention. See, Drake had such an attractive presence, as all dragons from his world did, that brought a lot of talk from the ladies. It didn't hurt that his human form was good looking, far more than he could say for the Chaos duo. His hair was a mid-neck length flaming red, falling down to his brow with spiky looking bangs, and his eyes were the same fiery color. While only slightly thinner than Acnologia, he was well toned, and he didn't bother wearing 6 cloaks to cover himself. Unlike the white-haired dragon, he always wore a red t-shirt and black pants, nothing fancy. Issei, on the other hand, wore a black and blue cloak over his clothes, much like his father. "Partner, I need to ask you something," Drake began. "Yeah? You're always asking me about my nights with women." It was well known in Lavender Town that Drake was a player, often sleeping with 1 or even 2 chicks at some point during each visit. Issei, for some reason, loved the tales of his conquests much to Acnologia's disgust. They're really interesting," the boy replied. Drake flashed a sneaky grin. "So what is my Dracoling up to, spending so much time in the adult section of the bookstore on the trips?" Issei turned beet red. But he always checked to make sure he wasn't followed. I have no idea what you're talking about. My nephew is discovering women for the first time." Drake cried, comical tears flowing from his eyes as he threw his arms around his buddy. "I never thought I'd see the day." You're squeezing me too tight." Drake relented a little. "I'll tell you what, Issei. Let's make a deal. I get Acnologia to buy you 1 book to bring home if you do something for me." Issei's eyes were red now, but he didn't want to hide his shame. This was an awesome deal. Short of his uncle buying him an erotic movie Lacrima, there was no better gift for a horny teen. "I'll do anything." There was one thing that Acnologia staunchly kept from Drake, telling Issei to never give the red dragon it. "I want you to let me see that spellbook from our world." Fiori, July X 784. Builder's Clive, S-class mage of fairy tale, was horrible at information gathering. See, he wasn't really the suave clever guy that most people found themselves spilling their secrets to. He had the looks for suave. Stubble, ginger hair, a muscular build, kind of a badass. The easiest way to describe it would be that he was good with women, but a little absent-minded. While he wasn't looking for personal secrets, he still had a terrible time trying to find information on the strange black monster that had been sighted around Lavender Town. For nearly 100 years later, small villages had disappeared, and the council had issued a special quest for any powerful mages to find and slay the beast. None had returned. There were all kinds of superstitions, and he had trouble finding out which were bogus. Hopefully, though, whatever he found at the peak of Mount Zonia wasn't the omnipotent annihilator of those myths. He hadn't let loose for years, and the prospect of an all-out fight to get justice for the beast's destruction made him eager. Still, he was weary of what he would find at the top, but he didn't even waver in his march up the mountain. Recently, too, there had been more sightings of the monster, and enormous craters had started appearing in Fiori with strange sightings of a black dragon near them. If it really was a dragon, it definitely wasn't the kind that Natsu loved. He took a deep breath, steadying himself and cracking his knuckles. It had taken him years to find the dragon's location, yet the hardest and most dangerous leg of his journey lay ahead. If only it wasn't snowing, he could be focused. There. A shadow in the dense cloud, the shape of a person. "Hey," he called out. As he got closer, he could make out the features on the man. Messy brown hair, a large black cape with blue designs. It was hard to tell, but the man appeared to be a teen and was thin, more like a civilian than a mage. "Hey, kid. There's a dangerous monster here, get away." "Monster?" the teen replied. "The hell, man. Not cool. My dad's a dragon, much better than a weirdest monster." "Your dad?" Gilderts replied, jaw hanging open. Quickly, he composed himself, his determined grin returning. "So you're a dragon slayer then?" "I guess you could say that," the kid shrugged. "But I'm much more powerful than a normal dragon slayer," he finished with a grin. Gilderts crossed his arms. "Then, before you try to fight me, let me ask you one thing." He was met with a nod. "How do you call that thing that destroyed villages your father?" The teen barely needed to think to answer that. They were too weak to defend themselves, so they deserved it. "Dad could wipe out the country, but he chooses not to cause you aren't worth it, and cause uncle would be super pissed." The mage groaned. 3 opponents, no wonder it's a 100-year job. He couldn't back down now, not when he would shame Fairy Tale's name. "Fine then. Before we start, what's your name, kid?" "I'm Gilderts, here to stop you guys." Sometimes, he was just too laid back for dramatics. "Dad doesn't like it when I give humans my name," he pondered aloud. "Whatever, I'm Issei, here too." "Well, my dad told me to beat you." "Man, I wanted that to be cooler." "I'll warn you, I'm bad at holding back," Gilderts admitted, letting loose a little magic power. "Well, Dad's letting me read my adult book when I win," Issei replied, grinning like mad. "So let's get it on." "Adult book, huh?" Gilderts chuckled. Sounded like a kid was just as quirky as Natsu, the dragon slayer in Fairy Tale, though Issei was evil. "Hell yeah." The declaration was followed by an enormous roar from the teen, as a huge wave of blue-colored magic left his mouth. Gildert simply held up a hand and used his crash magic to nullify the entire attack. Though it was a technique that could eliminate almost all ranged attacks, his hand was red, burning with a little pain. "Man, Fairy Tale's ace thought, can't let that hit me by surprise. I'd be done for." Gilderts took the moment to drop his large cape to the ground, revealing his muscled arms and thin body armor. Issei, in turn, took off his own overcoat. The blue tattoos decorating his arms in intricate designs were clearly a manifestation of his magic, Gilderts noted. But the boy used no magic circle or words, so the mage didn't know what element he used. "Here he comes." Issei charged at the man, bringing back his right arm. As with Natsu's attacks, Gilderts noticed a blue energy gathering around his hand, but something else was happening. His arm was growing scales, and his hand was now tipped with wicked claws. Chaos Dragon's Fist. By the time Gilderts blocked the attack with his forearm, he was blown away by the force, knowing there would be a bruise later. He couldn't waste the opportunity, so he slammed the kid's arm with one elbow and gathered white crash magic in the other hand, punching him in the dot. Issei skidded back, his dragon arm on his dot. The reprieve for the two lasted moments when Gilderts reached out a hand as if to grab Issei, sending a wave of crash magic. Issei, knowing there was no dodging, dove headfirst at the man, punching him again with his dragon arm. Deftly moving to the side, Gilderts slapped the punch away before returning with a left hook. Issei tried blocking, but he didn't have the experience or reaction time. Ignoring the sickening crack of the powerful hit on his jaw, he gathered blue magic at his feet. After he was blocked, the two launched into a flurry of punches and kicks. While Issei was quick, using his magic with expert precision, Gildert's was experienced and packed a mean punch. The two traded blows until Gildert saw an opening, grabbing Issei's hand mid-swing and blasting the boy away with a condensed beam of crash magic. Issei flew through the air over 20 feet, landing flat on his back, suffering only minor bruising. "You're strong for a human," Issei complimented, dusting himself off as he stood. "But I'm a dragon, and you have no hope of defeating me." The fairy tale mage wondered for a moment how the kid could be so upbeat, if a bit pervy one moment and condescending the next. The scales traveled over his entire body before his physique bulked up considerably and he grew a couple feet. His face pushed out, looking like a dragon's blunted maw, and sharp teeth filled his mouth. The blue lines covered his entire body as his shirt ripped off, two bird-like wings growing from his back. His feet and other hand grew claws, and his head grew four backwards-facing plates, resembling horns. Then his eyes turned fully white, with no pupil, giving him a far more demonic appearance. In seconds, he had gone from human to humanoid dragon. Gilderts exclaimed. "Okay, fine then. I guess I have to go all out." With an excited grin, a wide aura appeared around the man. For 5 full feet around his body, the pale energy raged from the ground, ripping the ground itself and pushing all of the snow away from the man. The light extended like a beacon hundreds of feet into the air. "Come on," the mage commanded. Issei obliged with a roar, body bursting alive with blue energy. The energy then converged in his wings and legs, and his pushed off his clawed feet, speeds barely visible to a mage as adept as Gildert's. He then crashed into the mage with a powerful headbutt, only to be met with that white crash magic. Uam. There was an enormous explosion as the two destructive magics clashed, creating a huge hole in the side of the mountain and sending rocks tumbling down. Damn, that hurt, Gildert's thought, planning his next move. While the redeemed mage was falling into the large crater the two just created, Issei remained high in the air with his wings, crossing his arms. There was no way he could successfully attack the kid in this position. "Fine then, I'll get him next time he comes at me." "Pathetic," the teen muttered, taking a deep breath in. The dense clouds, the air, and even some of the snow on the grounds was pulled up, as if fueling the next attack. "Hey, going to try that breath attack again," the mage knew. For a few 10 seconds, Issei gathered the energy in his body, a tumultuous storm easily felt by anyone in the vicinity. Then, he roared. It shook the mountain as a huge, dense beam of blue light, 20 yards across, was sent crashing towards his opponent. Shit. Then there was a huge cloud of debris, the crater now extending halfway towards the mountain's base, and the rest of the mountain was barely large enough to support the peak above them. Issei panted as the dust died down, knowing that he was nowhere near strong enough to do that twice, and that was banking on it taking up his opponent's energy or killing him. It was a powerful roar, easily enough to destroy a town. He wasn't fighting a town though, he was fighting a mage, one that was clearly powerful. But no matter that he wouldn't go full dragon to beat this opponent. It would kill his father's opinion of him. So, no matter how tired he was going to finish this guy off in his hybrid form. As the dust died down, something moved in the center. Issei ducked, pushing himself down with his wings, as a giant glowing net of disassembly magic flew over his head. That was a close. His thought was interrupted by a golden fist buried deep in his stomach. Shit, he had flown too far down to avoid it. Hajakens, Itten. Gilderts exclaimed with stalwart determination in his eyes. In a huge bolt of spiraling white gold energy, the powerful uppercut sent Issei flying hundreds of feet into the sky. Quickly, he beat his wings, steadying himself with some magic power, then dropped back lower. Blood was dripping from his maw, that punch had been powerful. It seemed his opponent fared even worse. Fairy Tail's ace was battered, his clothes tattered from the dragon's roar, and he was taking deep breaths, wiping sweat from his brow. That he managed to block the roar, leaving an insanely tall pillar supporting him, was an amazing feat. When it came to tactics, the man was definitely no slouch either. It was an intense fight, though quick, and both were feeling the effects. Issei coughed out some blood. "My ribs are bruised. I'd have never thought that there were humans this strong and talented out there." "You're tough, kid," Gilderts complimented. Issei wiped the blood from himself with an arm, lowering himself to be eye level with his enemy. "Not bad," he complimented. "I didn't know Dragonslayers had the power you do." "I'm trying to imagine the kid in my guild as a ferocious fire dragon," Gilderts thought aloud, ignoring the intense mood. "Ah, never mind me, I'm kin to getting old." "You know, for a human, you're alright," Issei decided, letting out a smile. Of course, it looked particularly vicious with all the sharp teeth. But the peace couldn't last. "I've still got some fight left in me," Gilderts claimed, rolling his shoulder. He activated his crash magic, shattering the pillar immediately below him, letting him fall to the base of the crater. He looked up to see the human dragon descending gracefully. Man, wings were badass, he decided. "You're almost out of magic power after blocking the roar." You should probably leave before anything happens, Issei suggested. He refused to admit how evenly matched they were. The man chuckled, amused. I'm a mage of fairy tale, kid. I may not be able to beat your father if he's any stronger than you, but I'm not backing away from a good fight. Maybe I'll knock some sense into you, and you'll tell him that you should protect the weak, not kill them. Protect them? What? Issei never heard such a thing, not even from Drag. Sure, his father protected him once or twice, but that was because Issei was going to become a dragon, practically a symbol of power. He didn't understand what obligation he'd have to protect random people without purpose. Yep, Gilderts affirmed. Weak, strong, it doesn't matter. Everyone's got a story, kid, and no one deserves to have theirs cut short. One day, when you have friends, loved ones you want to protect, not even the fate of the world will weigh heavier than their lives. Then, you'll understand. Issei stared for a moment, digesting the words. This human, far weaker than either of his teachers, suddenly sounded far wiser than the two combined. Sure, he didn't understand the words at all, hardly considering them all. But he still considered it, if just for a moment. Imbecile. A voice roared, an enormous shadow descending over the battlefield. Gilderts looked up as the shape slowly made itself clear. It was a dragon, a quadrupedal replica of Issei, but much, much larger. It dwarfed the two exponentially, and the power and rage radiating off the beast was practically palpable. The thought struck him that this was the kid's father. It roared, slashing a claw at Gildert's left leg. In a panic, he tried to block it with his left hand, using all of the magic he had left to prevent injury. Then, he heard a sickening sound, the sound of flesh being ripped open. He cut through my defense like it was nothing, Gilderts gasped, coughing up blood. His left arm and leg laid on the ground, completely severed. Shit, I need a hospital. He could barely stand on his remaining leg, but he wasn't going to lay down for this bastard. You fill my son's head with lies, the dragon roared, baring his teeth inches from the man's face. I would kill you, vermin, but it is not my place. Issei. Put off by the surprise amputation of his new sort of friend, Issei could hardly think about such a thing. Why you want me to? He coughed up more blood, wiping it away before his father noticed. You heard me? His father shouted back angrily. I can't. Issei protested. Please, he's not weak. He's strong, like me. Though he was using less than a quarter of his power, the maximum that he could hold in this form, he knew that any human facing a fourth of a dragon's power was beyond impressive. Acnologia huffed angrily. Strong. Ha. He could barely contend with your hybrid form. Has Drake convinced you to act this pathetic? Do not make me repeat myself. When Issei did nothing, the black dragon moved away, threateningly placing a razor-sharp claw on the teen-scale dot. You may have power, my son, but it pales in comparison to mine. Do not defy me. Kid, Gilderts grinned. Remember what I said. Just kill me and get it over with, make your dad proud. He accepted his fate. If that dragon wanted him dead, there was nothing that would stop him, not even his son. Issei rubbed at his eye, feeling a wetness there. Tears. He shouldn't be able to cry, he wasn't even human. How was he this weak? Gilderts. I'm sorry. Without any further words, he closed his eyes and drove his hand towards the man's heart, intent on ending it quickly to prevent suffering. But it never reached the mage, caught by a smaller human hand. That's enough, you two. Issei mumbled, the word barely forming on his dry tongue. The red-haired man gave him a reassuring smile, letting his hand go. Slowly Issei's black scales receded and his jaw returned to normal, leaving the Dragonslayer entirely human. He wasn't sure what caused that to happen, only that he knew that he wasn't going to be a monster and kill this man. What he was just about to do disgusted him. Gilderts was strong, maybe even strong enough to beat Issei in his hybrid form, but now no one would know thanks to Acnologia's interference. It's alright, Issei, you don't have to be a mindless killing machine. Is that what you wanted, Acnologia? Drake questioned, looking up. You dare interfere, Drake. It was growing dangerous again, the two releasing their potent energies. It was a time bomb. The man scowled. I know all about how you raise Issei. You teach him that everyone else is worthless, ants that can be easily crushed. You're a terrible father, Acnologia. All you want is power, that's all you ever wanted. Oh? The dragon replied, inches away from the Welsh. And I am sure you are a more capable teacher. The bitter sarcasm was obvious, rage fueling the dragon. Drake decided to turn to Issei, ignoring the dragon that was way beyond acceptable boundaries, inches from taking his head off. You can come with me, or stay with your father. I'm getting this guy medical attention. With that, he walked over the still standing Gilderts and draped the man over. Thanks, the mage said quietly. Issei looked between his father and his uncle, trying to run thoughts through his head as fast as possible. On one hand, his father was there his entire life. He had always delivered on his promises and always gave Issei a way to become stronger. But Drake was right, Acnologia really only cared for himself. He wanted Issei as a slayer for his own legacy, not to help Issei. Drake, though, put up with the black dragon just to teach Issei about Earth. He even taught him how to read and write in both worlds' languages, considering that Acnologia hadn't deemed the skill important. Then there was what Gilderts told him. A thought struck him. Has my dad even been nice? Sure, he sometimes praised Issei, but he was always so harsh about it. Often he could be flat out cruel. In the books, not the adult kind, he read, though he dismissed it at the time as heresy, the parents were understanding and compassionate. And so he made his decision. I love you, Dad, Issei was almost in tears, eyes watering, but I'm leaving with Uncle Drake. Surprisingly, the dragon wasn't upset. Instead, he fixed Issei with a look only he could understand, the same look he had when he first found the boy. When you grow hungry for more power, you have only yourself to blame. When you find you are unable to protect those you grow compassionate for, you will crave destruction. You are my legacy, my son, no matter what your help of an uncle says. And when you realize this, I will not be there to help you. He spread his wings and faced away from Issei. Then, with a gust of wind, Acnologia was gone, soaring off into the snowy sky, vanishing into the whiteness. Once again, Issei's father had left him. Lavender Town's hospital was honestly not up to standards. Mages rarely ever visited the town, and people rarely got into accidents, so their ability to care for Gilderts was sorely lacking. On the plus side, there was no wait, and it wasn't busy. With magic, medical facilities were capable of fantastic wonders, such as installing fully functioning prosthetic limbs, even if the hospital was somewhat unprepared. The Crash Mage had 2 of those artificial wooden limbs now, inciting a pirate joke from Drake. Thanks to Acnologia, Issei was pretty beat up over the entire situation. Currently, Drake and Issei are in the recovery room, keeping their new friend company. Turns out, Drake and Gilderts were shockingly similar, minus the whole species aspect. The nurse had even asked if they were brothers at one point, probably because of the hair color. Their baffled reactions were a welcome source of laughter from Issei. You know, Drake, Gilderts began, you two really didn't have to accompany me. But it's nice that you did. What else were we supposed to do? Our home was destroyed, and Acnologia flew away. Great Red knows where. Besides, I think Issei's got man crush on you, the Welsh dragon teased. Issei was immediately on the defensive. I like women, you jerk. Trust me, you've made that abundantly clear, his uncle assured, and the brunette knew exactly what he was insinuating. Ugh, Issei groaned. Why do you always have a comeback? Every time, every dang time. And Issei knew he was absolutely not a pervert, no matter what that jerk said. Gilderts grinned. Things like this reminded him of fairy tale. You may be a tough fighter, but you're decades too young to win a battle of wit. There was a short silence following that, when the mage decided it was about time to head home. He swung his legs over the bed and stood hesitantly. When the fake leg held, he went back to his casual posture. Thanks for your help. Now that I know this quest is a dead end, I'm going back to report to the guild. It's been 3 years, and I'm sure everything's changed. I guess you could call it a dead end, Drake agreed. Fighting that dragon is dangerous, even for me. So you're leaving? Issei addressed the recuperating mage. Yep, kid. Fairy tale's my home. That got Issei thinking about home. Not Mount Zonia, but Kuoh, Japan. Now that his reason for staying flew away, he could go back to his homeworld, where he belonged. There were answers there, about his real parents, and even Drake's explanations of fallen angels wouldn't change that. He was too young and too traumatized to remember what happened, and some newly reawakened part of him wondered if his mother could be alive. Or, he ventured to consider his father, since he never really did see the man die. What are you thinking so hard about? Drake asked. I want to go back to Kuoh. Gilderts chose to interject. Kuoh? Never heard of that place before. Most people haven't, the Welsh dragon replied. It is a long way from Fiori. The mage hummed in response, thoughts trailing away from the conversation. You do look a bit like a foreigner. Then again, Fiori's population was so diverse that everyone was completely different. Drake sternly addressed Issei. You can't run away from your problems, partner. I know, the teen sighed. Dad, Acnologia was right on one thing, though. When I go back, it will be because I want to. He looked up at the ceiling and sighed. I've lived on a mountain for 13 years in Drake, running away from my problems. Gilderts was floored that Issei had never been to another part of Fiori. Lavender Town and a frigid mountain hardly compare to famous tourist attractions, such as the sunny beaches or the magnificent capital, Crocus. Even the forests by Magnolia would be an interesting and welcome change. Even though he felt strongly about this, he knew it was not his place to interject. He had met the boy a week ago, hardly able to tell him how to live his life. You might regret the answers you find. If you lose everything, you could end up just like him. I've seen it before. When many of his previous hosts had activated Juggernaut Drive, the ultimate form of the boosted gear that granted incredible power at the cost of the user's life force, they had lost themselves completely. The last thing Drake wanted was to subject his partner to more pain, and finding out what the fate of his human parents was could end poorly. Like Acnologia. Issei growled out. Just say his name for once. He may have been my father, but I'm nothing like him. Only then did Issei realize that he was near yelling at the one person who stood by him. I've still got you, uncle, no matter what happens. Of course you do, the Red Dragon Emperor assured. When he thought about it, Issei losing it over the fate of his human parents might have been a stretch. If anything, the teen would shrug it off as a product of the human weakness Acnologia had loved to point out. Kid. Gildert surprised the two by commenting. A home is filled with people who you care about more than yourself. It doesn't matter where you go, as long as you find yourself someone you can love. That was one thing that fairy tale taught him. Even if he was a lone wolf that preferred peace and quiet, the guild held a place in his heart and would forever be somewhere he returned to. Issei's thoughts returned to when he was 3 years old. All he could remember about his old parents was his father's thick glasses. If that was his home so long ago, he at least owed the place a visit. Besides, like Gildert said, he would be with someone close, Drake. Drake, on the other hand, was a bit upset. I've lived millennia longer than him, and he's so much wiser. Not cool. Maybe he was a little jealous that the mage swooped in and commanded so much respect from his nephew. Issei. That snagged the kid's attention quickly. I think this could be beneficial for you. I'm due for a return too, can't keep the white one waiting much longer, after all. But I need you to promise me something. The kid locked eyes with his uncle before the latter continued. I want you to live like a normal teenager. You'll go to school, make friends, whatever kids these days do. More than that, though, I want you to learn how to be a human, not a dragon. Fine, Issei relented. If it's just for a year. Just because he had a change of heart about his father, it didn't mean that he stopped considering humans weak. Gildert's was a clear exception, but going to school, Drake had told him all about the stupid human schools, seemed like a little bit of a stretch. Spending the last week riddled with guilt while Gildert's recovered had given him plenty of opportunity to reflect on his views of the world. Before, he would never have considered such a proposition. Humans were inconsequential, hardly something a chaos dragon should concern themselves with. Now, though, Issei knew that they weren't as weak as he was told. Willpower, Gildert's had told him, was something that humans had an abundance of, something that Issei had. Still, he was Acnologia's son, and he wasn't about to let the whole of humanity off that easily. When do you want to leave? Drake asked. Once Gildert's is okay to go back to Fairy Tale. His sense of responsibility demanded that. The ace mage cut in again. You don't need to worry about me. See, I can walk perfectly fine on this thing. Gildert's claimed lightly, taking a step forward. Only then did he realize that he had no idea how to walk with the prosthetic leg, stumbling a little. When he tried to right himself, he slipped, landing on the floor. In a bout of carelessness, his crash magic shattered the floor beneath him. Ahhh. There was a shrill feminine scream. Before the man knew what was happening, he had landed in a nurse's office. Get out. She yelled, shoving him through the door and slamming it on his still working arm. Issei, barely refraining from giggling, fixed Drake with a grin. I think waiting might be a good idea. Issei felt as if he might cry, not that he would or anything. Any self-respecting dragon would never display such weakness. Still, how else could he express the pain and overwhelming sadness that he felt? Gildert's was going to leave, to go back to Fairy Tale, and give the guildmaster the grave news about the 100-year quest. Why would I feel this way? Issei tried to understand why he'd be so broken up over the human leaving, but he couldn't. Even going flying the day before hadn't cleared his head. They were standing a few miles out of the city, in the forest. Despite Drake's kind offer to fly the man to Magnolia, Gildert's had refused, preferring to walk instead. So, you guys are going home too? Fairy Tale's ace questioned. Seems so, Drake supplied. There is one problem though. The problem? There's always one of those, Gildert's complained. The fiery red magic circle appeared in the air, and the Welsh dragon reached in and pulled out a great tome. This thing has the spell to do it, but for some reason it only works when humans use it. The dragon had no idea why it was created that way, but it was a deadly tool for any one of the very few powerful humans on Earth. He only hoped that a Longinus wielder would never find it. That is weird. Magic is magic after all, the mage reasoned. In Fiori, even non-mages could use spells stored in artifacts. While this book, in contrast, seemed to draw from the user's magic and incantations to cast a spell. That's true. It's odd that you haven't asked why we need this to get home. It's odd that you're both dragons, Gildert's returned jokingly, but I don't care about that either. I'm getting too old to be surprised anymore. You wouldn't believe the stuff that happens on paid jobs. While the ace mage's mind drifted off, Drake turned his attention to Issei. You haven't said a word, partner. No, I guess I haven't, the teen replied. Gilderts, he drew the man's attention, I will understand what you told me, I promise. Gilderts gave him a strange gesture, holding up his index finger and thumb. I would expect nothing less from you, kid. If we'd meet again, I'd love to see how you've grown. Issei grinned. Don't think you'll get a lucky punch in then, old man. Too bad we didn't get to finish, the mage lamented. Rarely, if ever, did he have the chance to go all out. He just caused too much destruction, like how Zonia Mountain was now nothing more than a mutilated pile of rubble. But next time, you won't have the luxury. The friendly banter reminded him of fairy tale and brought a short pang of homesickness. Awesome, declared the teen. While saddening that they were parting ways, with the promise of them meeting again, Issei could accept it. A loud cough drew the attention back to Drake. If you're both finished saying your goodbyes, I think we should get going. He was hit with a bunch of awes from the two. Gilderts, this page should have all you need to cast the spell. It claims that it works without prior experience, as long as the incantation and pentagram are flawless. While the spell had supposedly killed Issei's human father, Drake saw no possibility that anything like that could happen to a mage as resilient as Gilderts. After all, the man was able to stand and talk while his left side was torn asunder. The mage cowered the text, his jaw dropping. I have no idea how to pronounce any of these words or draw a pentagram. In fact, he couldn't understand any of it, even if he did recognize the letters. That triggered an eye roll from the red dragon. I already drew the pentagram while the two of you were trash talking. Before either could protest, saying that it wasn't trash talking, Drake continued. Never mind. Issei, step next to me. Gilderts, when you finish reading, toss the spellbook back to us. Got it? Well, if I could go toe-to-toe with a dragon, it shouldn't be too hard to pronounce this insane language. While Issei smirked, his uncle sighed at the flawed logic. Alright, then, let's get started. And so, Gilderts struggled through 4 lines of Latin. And as the chant reached its close, the fairy tale mage tossed the book back to Drake, and the 2 dragons began glowing white, an immense amount of magic power flowing to them from Gilderts. Before the mage could process what was happening, they were gone. As the light died down, the 2 blinked to find themselves in a dusty old room, devoid of furniture. At one point, the place could have been called a home, but all that resided there now were spider webs and small rodents scurrying around. The white paint, if it can be called that, was chipped and split apart by cracks running down the wall, as if no maintenance whatsoever had been put into the house. A couple old boxes rested in the corner, forgotten by the previous owner. Issei looked around, as if expecting to suddenly remember what it was like to grow up in this home. He tried to recall the face that his human father's glasses belonged to or what it felt like to have a mother, but nothing magical happened. So this is it, Drake stated matter-of-factly to break the silence. He closed a book and held it to his side, took a step away from where they landed, and began examining the house. I don't remember, the brunette replied, downcast. Drake actually laughed, a short deep chuckle in an attempt to lighten the mood. Come on, partner, you can't expect to remember everything in an instant. We should look around for something. He hated seeing his nephew feel so down, something that had unfortunately become the norm lately. Issei wasn't moved by the suggestion. Alright. I can do that. Drake patted the kid on the back, a light reassuring tap that didn't go unappreciated, then he found the stairs, deciding it was best to leave Issei to check the first floor. As the creaking of the rickety stairs began to fade, Issei forced himself to check inside the boxes. Slowly, he felt his curiosity overpower his trepidation as he began pulling things out. First, there was a stuffed bear, the kind he had as a little boy. Then he saw a picture, one of him with a big smile on his face and the number 4 in the background. A birthday. Issei wondered. He barely remembered which day of the year it was, much less what it felt to celebrate one. He dug in further, finding some ratty old envelopes with nothing in them and a bunch of silvery utensils. There was a board game in there too with an 8x8 grid, alternating black and white squares. An image flashed in his head of a black-haired man with glasses playing against another adult, one whose face Issei couldn't recall. I wish I remembered what family is like, Issei sighed, frustrated. He wanted memories, not a bunch of silverware and a board game. His surname was Haidu, but he knew nothing about the Haidu. For a few minutes, he kept sifting through the junk, finding nothing useful, until there was another picture. Though it was torn and dusty, it was clearer than anything else in the box. It was them, his human parents. The ones who were supposed to raise him, not throw him away like Acnologia. The man didn't seem too happy to have his picture taken, and his eyes seemed closed, even through the thick glasses. He had messy black hair, kind of like Issei's own, but shorter. The woman looked like she knew the man wasn't paying attention, about to point it out. She had uniform bangs that were eyebrow length, and the rest of her brown hair was smooth and stopped above her shoulders. Judging by the man's tuxedo and the woman's white dress, it was an important occasion that Issei didn't know about. He flipped it over. It read Haidu Takeshi and Hinoka, August 28, 1993. Those must have been their names. He had no idea how the dates worked here, so that was useless. You find anything, partner? The voice made him jump. He must have been quite distracted. He passed the read the picture. Just this. As Drake scrutinized the picture, he decided to voice some of his thoughts. I think I want to go outside now and learn about Japan. Is that okay? He half expected Drake, just like Acnologia, to say no and lecture him. Course it is. You don't need my permission. Really? The dragon rolled his eyes. If you flare your energy, I'll be there. Besides, it's midday and no battles ever happen during the day. That was true, since the one thing the three factions agreed on was not exposing themselves to random humans, which meant staying under the radar. Issei's glum expression went from surprise to a large grin. He did always love visiting the towns of Fiori after all, and he had a whole new world without the regulations and rules that bound him in the last one. Awesome. Before his uncle could appreciate the change in demeanor, the teen was off. He always was a little too free-spirited, Drake sighed. The dragon wasn't too interested in exploring himself, rationalizing that the human world can't have changed much in the past couple decades. In retrospect, after learning just how far technology had come, that was probably the most humiliating thought he'd ever had. In a small room sat a rather average man with jet black hair and golden bangs, his feet comfortably resting on the office desk in front of him. His eyes were a vibrant purple, his most unusual feature. Resting in the palm of his hand was an odd yellow lance-like dagger with a purple jewel that he was idly tossing to himself. On the shelves lining the walls rested other heirloom-looking ancient artifacts of similar origin, ranging from armor to an unusual length of chain. He had a lot of free time, and he rather liked to think of himself as a collector of sorts. Azazel-sama. Someone yelled, almost imperceptible from the distance. He sighed, waiting for the shouting to get closer until the door slammed open with shocking force. Standing there, almost panting, was a very interesting-looking woman. She had round, clear black-rimmed glasses that kept her strikingly green eyes visible. She wore a business suit and kept her black hair in a bun. There was also the fact that she had a striking figure, perfect enough for Azazel to make her a secretary. Of course, she was quite the shrewd woman as well, but Azazel liked to kill two birds with one stone. Azazel-sama. Yes, Val. Her name was Variel, though Azazel was her nickname. It teased her and annoyed Vali as well. She seemed a little flustered at his calm tone. This is important. And why are your feet on your desk? You're supposed to be our governor general, she accused. This is why he didn't often have a secretary. Always telling him to act like his post required instead of staying calm and relaxed. So, what's the news? Our tracking division spotted an item previously thought lost, the one you ordered them to monitor for years ago. That didn't help whatsoever. You're going to have to be more specific. I've got them looking for hundreds of magical items and sacred gears. It was all for that hobby of his, trying to recreate sacred gears to aid his research on improving his own artificial sacred gear. Such was the spear he had in his hand now, called the Downfall Dragon Spear, containing the essence of the Dragon King Fafnir, who agreed to aid him in his research. Her face was pink now. She was either angry at her boss, embarrassed that he wasn't acting as she thought he should, or ashamed at the familiarity he addressed her with. Certainly, through a tough fallen angel in her own right, she was an odd one. It's that book. It was called, something of the Void. Do you mean Secrets of the Void, the spell tome that a magician stole 11 years ago? She nodded. It is important news that the book contains powerful spells that only magicians can use. Ariel was confused. Rarely, if ever, did humans work directly for the Grigori, the organization of fallen angels that Azazel led. When they did, they were normally stray exorcists or exiled priests, not magicians capable of high-level magic. If only magicians could use it, what was it worth to the organization? So what made you put it on the top priority list? It hides a secret I'd prefer to stay hidden, he explained. That means I'm going myself to retrieve this, and once I find it, I'll put it somewhere no one can find it. We can't have a repeat of the last time. He stood up, a few inches taller than his secretary. Despite his somewhat jovial attitude, Variel knew he was serious. She would never pry the information from him, not on his life. So where was it? The same place it disappeared, a household in Kuoh, Japan. When she saw him leaving, she tried to stop him. You can't go alone, sir. She would be a suitable distraction if there was trouble. The governor general laughed. I'm not alone, Val. I'm taking Fafnir with me. She scowled. That doesn't count. This is why I don't usually have a secretary. You all just don't know how to lighten up, the man pointed out with an exasperated sigh. Wait, before you go, there was more information, Variel tried in a desperate stall attempt to get the man thinking about his actions. Grigori was having a lot of internal issues, and she couldn't let Azazel's leadership seem weak, and there was no way she'd stop just because the man told her to lighten up. If he went on this trip and was injured, it could spell disaster for the organization. Oh? The KBL didn't check in again this month. It wasn't much, but surely it was enough to get him to pause for a moment, right? His laugh resumed, making her glare even more at the leader. He is a fallen angel, Val. You can't expect him to be much good at following rules. Though he said that, Azazel was counting his fellow leaders in fractions. KBL is getting out of hand. Perhaps this warranted a conversation with the fallen, but it certainly wasn't as important as the spell tome. I won't be gone long, Azazel stated as a measure of reassurance. A purple magic circle appeared under him, and his body dissolved into blue particles in seconds. Won't be gone long, my ass. He'll probably go to a bar afterwards, the secretary sighed, deciding that it might be a good idea to go back to finance. Azazel was a charismatic and spectacular leader, but he was an awful guy to try to manage. He did things on his own time and his own way, regardless of the consequences. He wasn't reckless, nor was he dumb, he was just an enigma that no one understood. I do hope he can handle this without incident. As Drake sat on the stairs and Issei was out doing whatever in the town, he had warned the kid that he could not use magic. He couldn't stop thinking about the past month. After Acnologia going ballistic and finally snapping a few weeks ago, the teen had changed from his upbeat self. That was expected from such an event, but the Welsh dragon knew that his nephew would be like this for a while. That was actually why he suggested human school in the first place, to help the teen meet people his age and learn that there's more to life than what Acnologia says. Issei needed some new goals, or he'd find himself in a bottomless pit that there was no escaping from. But, hopefully, the kid was having fun now, seeing his old home with new eyes. It was nice that, despite how Issei viewed humans and weakness in general, he never acted like that in public. That was one thing that Drake prided himself on, helping Issei to not be an ass. Gildertz was a fantastic influence in that respect as well. Ugh, Drake groaned in an epiphany. I'm a lonely dragon, aren't I? I get some peace and quiet and spend it fretting over Issei. He would have never thought he could change so much in only a few years, just because of an intimidating dragon and a bratty kid. Not only had he finally become the teacher that every boosted gear user had wished he was, he had learned how to become human and completely conceal his presence. He wasn't even plotting against Albion. Then, suddenly, a dark purple magic circle appeared in front of him, startling Drake out of his thoughts. Company already? Seems the universe has a sense of irony. He stood up, prepared to beat the tar out of whatever being was unfortunate enough to bother him. As a man materialized, the dragon's eyes widened in recognition. Azazel. He must be here for the book. His stance relaxed. Azazel eyes the redeed in front of him, curious. He sensed no enormous power from the apparent human, but he could not deny the peculiar feeling in the back of his skull. Well then, he commented, mind telling me if there are any ancient relics around? He twirled his artificial sacred gear, pointing the tip at the Welsh dragon. Come on, Azazel. Is that any way to greet an old friend? That put a contemplating look on the fallen's face. Old friend. On second thought, your voice is a little familiar. He took a few moments, just thinking about this. I'm drawing a blank here. He had met so many people, particularly women, in his thousands of years alive. Ah, the dragon laughed with a sly grin. Last we met, I was sealed in someone's arm. No way, Azazel muttered. This man couldn't be, the boosted gear had disappeared completely 11 years ago with no sign of reappearing. It may not have affected Vali, but it surely had an impact on Azazel, who takes pride in his tracking skills with sacred gears. How is this even possible? Being released from a sacred gear, traveling dimensions, or taking a human form? He joked, making Azazel feel even more lost. I've had an unusual past couple years. That was an understatement. So this means that the one who was sent away all those years ago was the Seeker Issei, the fallen pondered, connecting the dots. Another world entirely, huh? Oh, yeah, he added at the dragon's surprise, I know exactly what this book is. That is why it was so heavily guarded at the church, and why my men wasted no time in retrieving it, assuming that those who stole it were a threat. The existence of a whole other world could bring ruin upon either their world or the other, depending on the strength of both. It was something Azazel, who had been pushing a policy of non-aggression the past few hundred years, did not desire in the least. Yes, hi do Issei, Drake confirmed, before sizing up the fallen angel in front of him with a dangerous look. His goal is to learn what has become of his parents. They were the ones you chased and murdered. Whoa, hold on here, Azazel tried to placate. I didn't murder anyone, nor was I going to. I was actually going to give them a job offer once I learned the kid held the boosted gear. You're telling me that Issei's human father sacrificed himself for nothing? The pain he suffered for the last years was worthless. If there was one partner Drake had ever come to care for, it was Issei. The dragon may not have been angry yet, but Azazel had some explaining to do. The Fallen knew that, if the man facing him was a heavenly dragon, a fight could only end in disaster. But then again, Drake wouldn't want to draw too much attention for fear of repeating his punishment from the Great War. I made a mistake, it happens. I came here today to seal the book away and keep it hidden so no one would ever find it. It was a poor decision to hide it in plain sight. Drake sighed, realizing how tense he had gotten. I don't forgive easily, just ask Albion, but I do believe that you had no intention of bringing Issei harm. Speaking of, where is he? I've never seen you so worried over a human. While Drake may exhibit some concern over his host, it was because he was somewhat forced to, sealed away and all, and he never got this emotional. That quickly brought a chuckle from the dragon. Who said he was human? Azazel had given up on being surprised by now, his interest only growing instead. This is a long story, and it begins when Issei and I arrived in a world known as Earthland. At some point, the two had devolved into drinking liquor. Azazel fetched some glasses and a large bottle when he heard that Drake had never drank alcohol before. And now, the two were having a blast while Issei was nowhere to be seen. When Drake told him how he was released from the sacred gear, Azazel intensely probed to find out exactly what happened. According to Acnologia, Dragonslayer magic could wipe out all previous magics, but it was a little known fact that sacred gears were bound to the soul. Azazel suspected that becoming a Chaos Dragonslayer had purged Issei's soul completely, changing him irreversibly and forcibly removing the boosted gear. But that was only part of their story. Azazel, following Drake's tale with a glass in hand, interjected, so wait, you're telling me that this Gilderts nearly destroyed the hospital he was recovering in by accident? He's absent-minded, Drake reasoned, grinning. I'll say. The Fallen took the moment to refill their cups. This stuff is great, the Welsh dragon complimented. Well, anyway. He led us to a mage that helped us get back, and here we are. Azazel placed a finger on his chin and thought, twirling the downfall dragon spear. So, you two have nowhere, but this ratty dump to stay and Issei is supposed to go to school. He summarized. To get him to forget about his father. Azazel nodded. Acnologia sounded like quite the scary figure, especially if he truly was above Dragon King level, as Drake had said. No wonder Drake preferred it that Azazel leave before Issei gets back. If all that the kid remembered about his childhood was that fallen angels killed his parents, meeting one face to face could be a bad idea right now. That was doubly compounded by the nature of chaos dragon magic and the fact that Issei was in some kind of funk. I can help with that. Of course, you wouldn't have to worry about keeping the book safe. How can you help? Drake wondered. Typical dragon, not knowing a thing about the human world. The Fallen rolled his eyes. You don't have any money, and you won't get Issei enrolled anywhere without an ID. Drake was crying comically now. How could I forget about that? Azazel facepalmed at the sight of the perturbed dragon. For some reason, even though he was the fearsome Red Dragon Emperor, Drake had some odd mental breakdowns. Here, taking the book, Drake pulled the item from his pocket and shoved it at Azazel, almost knocking over their drinks. Just don't tell Albion. Geez, the Fallen sighed, what is it with you two? When Drake didn't answer, he decided it best not to pursue that route. I'll get the both of you set up with a nice apartment and everything else you need. Azazel gathered the glasses and the bottle, there was barely any left, and made to leave. Wait, the dragon yelled. Before you go, you said you were working on doing an artificial sacred gear, right? Oh, yeah. Azazel sat back down. I've got Fafnir helping me make this. I call it the Downfall Dragon Spear, he gloated proudly, showing off his creation. I've got another request, if it isn't much of a problem. Now that the Governor General's interest had peaked, Drake reached into his pockets and pulled out a bunch of red and green shards. It looked like they were pieces of metal, Azazel noted. This is the boosted gear. What's left of it, Azazel jokes. This isn't useful for creating a different gear without the sealing protocols and your life force. Drake shrugged. I expected as much. I'm sure that, between your genius and my experience, we could figure it out. I was hoping to give Issei a watered-down version as a gift. Issei had always wanted to use the boosted gear, and this could also give Drake some peace of mind. Though Issei was more than a match for a high-class devil, beings like dragons always attracted the worst type of attention. Azazel thought aloud. It could be possible to recreate it, though it won't be nearly as useful as a Longinus. Worst case scenario, we can turn it into a twice critical event. I'll contact you later with more information, but until then it was good catching up with you, Drake. Ciao. Quickly, without waiting for a response, Azazel had teleported away with a magic circle. Well, that was fun, Drake decided, feeling a bit woozy. I wonder what Issei's up to. Whoa, that alcohol was really starting to kick in now. Screw that, I think I'll take a nap. The large black dragon flew effortlessly high above the clouds, blending into the night sky. Below, millions of lights glimmered and danced, a far more spectacular sight than the average daytime city. Still, Issei couldn't help but feel a small sense of accomplishment. He may not have learned what the fate of his human parents was, but for the moment he didn't care. He was just relieved to have spent the day in Kuoh, a place filled with whole new opportunities. Here, he had a new lease on life, and he sure as hell wasn't going to screw it up. Kuoh, he discovered, was an unusual place. Earlier that day, while he was walking through town, people stared at him funny and made odd comments about his cloak. Something about him dressing up for an anime convention. It wasn't weird, people wore them all the time in Fiori, so why not here? Also, there was the incident where he went to a restaurant booth and got the best damn food he'd ever had. The problem? He had no way to pay for it, even when he tried forking over all of the jewels, Fiori's currency, that he kept in his pocket. Thankfully, aside from some yelling and a woman with a threatening-looking spatula, he suffered no magic shocks to his self-worth. He even escaped mostly unharmed. Okay, so maybe he had no idea how this world worked. Shouldn't I be getting back? He realized, noticing the time. Uncle's probably worried, he sighed, knowing that Drake had been way overprotective recently. As he veered right, he smelled something unusual, sinister, almost like a demon. That could be any one of the billions of things Drake tried to make me learn about, Issei groaned, trying to tell which it was. Yokai devils, demons, oh man, I'm going to lose sleep over this, unless I check it out. Whatever it was, surely it would be no match for a chaos dragon. As he angled his wings against the air current to slow down, a thought struck him. Oh, right, not supposed to be seen. Drake would kill me if he hears about someone spotting a 20-meter-long dragon. Narrowly avoiding a long-winded lecture about how much of an idiot he was, Issei shrunk back to his hybrid form and landed behind a warehouse. This is where that strange smell is coming from. Where the hell's the door? He paced around the side, looking for any form of entrance to the metal-walled warehouse. Eventually, he gave up and just punched his way in, sending metal flying. The inside was dark, even for his keen predatory eyesight. Then, he saw a pair of cat-like yellow eyes. A feminine voice hummed, "Who is it that intrudes on my domain? Oh god, what's rotting?" It was like someone left out an entire crate of eggs, then threw old beef on it and let it stew. And Issei thought whatever lived here smelled unpleasant. Ooh, a dragon. I've always wondered how one might taste. Issei shivered at the sadistic and freaky tone, feeling a bit threatened. This was one creepy woman. And this one was either way arrogant or just plain stupid to openly threaten a dragon like that. Eventually, he could make out the form of a slim, buxom woman. "She's," he exclaimed, immediately blushing. Her body had an hergless figure topped off with spectacular breasts, far better than Issei had seen before. The visage was ruined by the sharp teeth and the face, looking more like something that belonged to a beast than a woman. "What are you? Why does it smell so bad? Didn't you know? I'm a stray devil, honey." Wow, her teeth were sharper than his with that creepy smile. "And that's just human blood and flesh. Delicious. I'm sure you'd love a taste, dragon kun." He threw up a little in his mouth. "You mean you eat people?" He shivered. Gross. The lady. Damn, he had met messed up people in Fiori, though no one was this awful. "If you can't appreciate such a delicacy, then you can die." Her face contorted and a magic circle appeared. Before he knew what was happening, she spat some foul-smelling, noxious yellow liquid at him. "No part of this is something that I want to be involved in," Issei cried, easily avoiding it. The metal wall behind him sizzled, melting into nothing. This is just wrong." He dodged another stream of whatever it was, then decided enough was enough. "Alright, lady. You may be super hot and all, minus the face, but you don't deserve to live. Stupid dragon, you'll be my next meal." Possessed by some incredible unholy rage, she charged at Issei, her hands morphing into enormous claws. "I doubt that," he drawled, gathering blue energy in his fist. "Now die," the she-beast roared, her claws glowing blood red as she swiped the giant things at the teen. In a flash of light, Issei pushed off with his feet and wings, flying forward and impaling his fist directly in the stray's chaos dragon's fist. 1 second, his opponent had a shocked look, completely unprepared for the dragon to move so quickly. The next, the stray devil was blasted away by a wave of magic, sending light throughout the whole warehouse. Bloodied and beaten, the beast smashed into the far metal wall, denting it then falling forward. Unable to support herself, she landed flat on her face, her stomach with a large hole through the center. "Jeez," Issei complained. "Drake is going to be so mad." "Please," the dying devil moaned, reaching a hand up. "Don't look at me. You're the one who wanted to eat me," the dragon muttered, worried about his uncle. With a sigh, he sat down next to his fallen opponent. It was awkward and crushed his tail, but he was too busy thinking about something. "At least I didn't flare up that much energy." Maybe he didn't notice. Whatever, he wasn't going to bother with killing this one. It was probably best that he get back before someone else showed up and chose to investigate. Issei quickly turned and left the warehouse, preferring to forget about his strange encounter on the flight back. After the teen left, a red magic circle appeared in the center, and two bodies began to take shape. Both were teenage women with large assets and shapely figures. One had crimson hair, the color of blood, that reached midway down her back. Her brilliant blue eyes seemed to scan through the darkness with ease. The second had knee-length dark hair tied back into a ponytail and violet eyes. While the redhead wore a typical Japanese school uniform, the other had the white and red attire of a Maiko, a Shinto shrine maiden. Ara, violet eyes, Akeno, chuckled, looks like someone beat us to it, Rias. It seems so, Rias, the leader, replied. And by the energy I felt, they were quite strong as well. You're interested, aren't you? Absolutely. This territory does belong to my household after all. That is why the two were sent to eliminate a low-class stray devil in the first place. The two were interrupted by a pained sound coming from the dying stray devil. Kill me. Yufufu, Akeno giggled, you're a resilient one, aren't you? Rias faced the stray. I'll be happy to put you out of your misery if you tell me who did this to you. The stray cursed at her. Or, she continued, I could have Akeno interrogate you. She's very into S&M. Fine, the stray relented. He was a black dragon. Interesting. She gathered the red and black magic of the Gremory clan's famed power of destruction. Now, beggin', she declared as a huge wave of energy overwhelmed the stray. There was a short scream followed by silence. The stray devil had been completely erased from existence. So, Akeno said, are we going to look for this black dragon? Rias shook her head. It was best not to chase after trouble. No, it'd be a bad idea to mess with a dragon, doubly so since it is strong enough to remain unseen in the human world. I should warn my brother, and we should keep an eye out. Partner, you're an idiot. That was all Drake had to say after Issei gave his uncle a full recount of the day. At least no one saw him, and at least none of the devils decided to see just who or what killed their stray. One day, though, if the kid kept going on this road, he was going to screw up. Issei replied sheepishly, rubbing his head. No more late night flights or fights, got it? You'd better. If you get yourself in trouble, I'm not bailing you out. Issei knew that the warning was total bull, but neither felt like pointing it out. So, I met with a friend last night. Not fair, the teen groaned. You said to stay hidden. You're doing a great job with that, Drake pointed out sarcastically. Anyways, my friend dropped off some things we need. Money, IDs, a couple brochures for schools. Schools? Oh man, you're still making me go to school, aren't you? Issei complained. Yes, and I think I found one you might be able to put up with. Really? Wondered the brunette. Yep. Drake grinned. Kuoh Academy. It was an all-girls school until recently, so you'll be able to meet tons of babes. The teen rolled his eyes at his uncle. That, and they are one of the top in academics. Issei sighed. I can't wait. Thanks for watching this video. If you really enjoy this video, like, subscribe, and comment down below, and turn on that bell notification. Don't forget to support and follow the DragonKingNatsu for writing that awesome fanfic, and also make sure to comment on this story link in the description. See you in the next video. Goodbye.